London's O2 Arena fell into an unusual silence on that cold January evening in 2007. 20,000 people stood motionless, their breathing collectively suspended, creating that rare sacred vacuum that exists only in the moments before something extraordinary unfolds. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation, heavy with the weight of expectation. This was the third night of Michael Jackson's Back to Life European mini-tour, his first live performances since the controversial trial that had nearly destroyed him. Outside, the Thames reflected the city lights in fractured patterns, while inside, fans from across the globe had gathered, drawn by the magnetic promise of witnessing the king of pop's return to the stage he had once ruled without equal. Some had camped for days to secure tickets. Others had spent their life savings to travel from distant continents. All shared the same unspoken fear, that this might be their last chance to see the legend perform. The arena had been dark for nearly 7 minutes, a deliberate extension of the traditional pre-show blackout that heightened the almost unbearable tension. The only illumination came from thousands of mobile phone screens, creating a galaxy of artificial stars throughout the vast space. Whispers rippled through the darkness, excited theories about which song would open the show, what costumes might be revealed, what magic might unfold in the next 2 hours. And then, without warning, a single beam of pure white light pierced the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty space at center stage. A collective gasp rose from 20,000 throats. The legendary voice of Michael Jackson, disembodied and haunting, filled the arena. "Are you ready?" The crowd responded with a roar that seemed to physically push against the walls of the massive venue. Another beam joined the first, then another, creating a dance of light that seemed to search the arena for something or someone. The opening synthesizer notes of Billie Jean thundered through the sound system with such crystal clarity that the sound became a physical presence. And then, as if conjured from the collective desire of 20,000 beating hearts, Michael Jackson appeared, rising through a trapdoor in the stage floor, his silhouette instantly recognizable even before the full lights revealed him. He stood motionless for 3 perfect beats, allowing the audience to absorb his presence, to confirm that this wasn't an illusion or an impersonator, but the man himself. Michael wore a reimagined version of his iconic black sequin jacket, altered slightly to reflect his leaner frame, but immediately connecting this moment to his historical legacy. The famous single white glove caught the light and scattered it like diamonds across the stage. When he finally moved, it was with that supernatural precision that had defined his performance style. Movements so sharp and clean, they seemed to bend reality around them, creating their own gravity. For the next 45 minutes, Michael commanded the stage with the authority of a performer who had spent a lifetime perfecting his craft. Each song flowed into the next with seamless transitions, each dance sequence executed with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. The audience responded with near-religious fervor, singing every lyric, mirroring every iconic move, creating that rare symbiotic relationship between performer and audience where energy flows in both directions, amplifying with each exchange. By the time Smooth Criminal concluded, Michael executing the famous forward lean that still defied logical explanation. The crowd was in a state of collective euphoria. Some wept openly. Others stood in slack-jawed wonder. All understood they were witnessing not just a comeback, but a resurrection. Michael moved to center stage as the band seamlessly transitioned into the opening notes of The Way You Make Me Feel. But something in his demeanor had shifted. Those closest to the stage, and those watching the massive screens flanking the performance space, noticed a subtle change in his expression. The almost trance-like focus that characterized his performances had been replaced by something more human, more vulnerable. Michael raised his hand in a gesture the band immediately understood. The music softened but didn't stop. He removed his in-ear monitors, an unusual action mid-performance. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the power of his singing voice. Instead, it was soft, almost fragile, forcing the audience into complete silence to hear him. "I need to take a moment," he said, the words hanging in the suddenly still air. "Some of you might know that we lost someone very important recently." The crowd remained silent, 20,000 people collectively holding their breath. On Christmas Day, just 3 weeks ago, we lost the Godfather of Soul, Mr. James Brown. A murmur of recognition rippled through the audience. Many nodded solemnly. Some clasped their hands together in unconscious prayer. Michael's voice grew softer, more intimate, as if he were speaking not to a massive arena, but to a small circle of friends. "I don't think many people understand what James Brown meant to me. When I was a little boy, just 5 years old, my mother woke me in the middle of the night. She said, 'Michael, someone special is on television. You need to see this.'" Michael paused, his eyes distant with memory. And there he was, James Brown on the TMI show. I'd never seen anything like it. The way he moved, the sounds he made, the command he had over the audience. It was like watching someone from another planet, someone who had tapped into something magical and powerful. The arena remained in reverent silence. Even those who had come primarily for the spectacle, for the hits, for the moonwalk, since they were witnessing something rare. Michael Jackson speaking from the heart, unscripted and unguarded. "When I was 10 years old," Michael continued, "my father took me to the Apollo Theater in Harlem to see James perform live. Somehow, word got backstage that little Michael Jackson from the Jackson 5 was in the audience. James stopped the show and called me up on stage. A small, surprisingly boyish smile briefly transformed Michael's features. I was terrified, but I went up there, and James put his arm around me and said to the crowd, 'This little guy is something special. You watch out for him.'" Michael's voice caught slightly on the last words. He paused, visibly gathering himself. The band had now stopped completely, allowing his words to fill the vast space unaccompanied. Later, he showed me how to do the camel walk. He spent almost an hour with me, showing me how to slide just right, how to feel the rhythm in my body before I expressed it through movement. Here was the biggest star in the world at that time, taking an hour to teach a little boy how to dance. Michael shook his head slightly, still seemingly amazed by the memory decades later. That moment changed my life. It showed me what kind of artist I wanted to be, not just someone who performed, but someone who connected, someone who passed on what they knew, someone who lifted others up. The silence in the O2 Arena had taken on a different quality now. Not the silence of anticipation that had preceded the show, but the silence of communion, of shared understanding. Michael walked slowly to the side of the stage where a stagehand waited with something covered by a small black cloth. Michael took it with a nod of thanks and returned to center stage. James Brown taught all of us something essential about performance, about soul, about giving everything you have every single time you step on stage. He'd say, "You got to pay the cost to be the boss." And he paid that cost every night of his performing life. Michael's fingers worked at the cloth, carefully unveiling what it concealed, a single worn dancing shoe, scuffed and creased from years of use. He held it up so the audience could see. "This is one of James Brown's shoes from his final tour. His family sent it to me after he passed, knowing what he meant to me." The simplicity of the object, contrasted with its profound significance, created a powerful visual that was immediately captured by dozens of cameras throughout the arena. Later, that image, Michael Jackson holding James Brown's worn shoe under a single spotlight, would become iconic, reproduced on tribute shirts, in documentaries, in music history books. "Tonight," Michael said, his voice gaining strength, "I want to do something special for James. Not just a moment of silence, because James Brown was never about silence. He was about sound, about movement, about life." Michael turned to the band and nodded. The drummer began a familiar rhythm, the opening beats of James Brown's "I Got You, I Feel Good." A murmur of recognition and approval rippled through the crowd. But rather than launching into the song as expected, Michael raised his hand again, stopping the music after just a few bars. "No," he said, almost to himself. "That's not quite right." He turned back to the audience. James wouldn't want us mourning. He wouldn't want us performing his songs as a tribute. What James would want. Michael paused, seeming to make a decision in real time, unscripted and unrehearsed. What James would want is for us to take what he gave us and make something new with it, to keep evolving the music, the dance, the message. He turned to his musical director. "Kenny, do you remember that piece we were working on last month? The one with the bridge we couldn't quite figure out?" The musical director nodded, clearly surprised, but professional enough to hide any uncertainty. Michael turned back to the audience. "What you're about to hear hasn't been performed before. It isn't finished. It isn't polished. James taught me perfection on stage, but he also taught me that sometimes the most honest performance comes from the rawest place." The band members exchanged glances, clearly moving into uncharted territory. Michael nodded to the percussionist, who began a simple, hypnotic beat. The keyboardist joined in with a haunting minor progression. And then Michael began to move, not with the precise, rehearsed choreography that had characterized the show until now, but with something more primal, more instinctual. Those familiar with both artists could see elements of James Brown's raw energy combined with Michael's fluid precision, creating a hybrid style that honored its influences while creating something entirely new. When Michael began to sing, his voice carried a rough, emotional quality rarely heard in his meticulously produced recordings. The lyrics spoke of legacy, of carrying forward what our teachers give us, of honoring the past by creating the future. The chorus, repeated with increasing emotional intensity, centered around the phrase, "Soul never dies." If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories about Michael Jackson that reveal the man behind the legend, the heart behind the perfectionism, the humanity behind the myth. As the impromptu performance continued, something extraordinary happened within the O2 Arena. The invisible barrier that typically exists between performer and audience, even with a performer as skilled at connection as Michael Jackson, began to dissolve. People in the front rows spontaneously rose to their feet, swaying with the music, some with tears streaming down their faces. Their movement spread like a wave throughout the arena until all 20,000 people were standing, moving as one organism connected by sound and emotion. Michael, seeing this response, pushed further into vulnerable territory. The carefully constructed persona, built over decades as both armor and artistic expression, fell away, revealing glimpses of the man behind the myth. His movements became less calculated, more instinctual. His voice cracked with emotion on certain phrases. At one point, he executed a spin that deliberately evoked James Brown's style rather than his own, a physical acknowledgement of his artistic lineage. As the song built toward its climax, Michael held James Brown's shoe against his heart with his right hand while his left reached toward the ceiling, creating a visual metaphor so powerful that no one present would ever forget it. The physical connection to his mentor's legacy and the spiritual aspiration to carry it forward. The final note hung in the air for what seemed like eternity. Michael holding the sustained tone with closed eyes, every muscle in his body visibly engaged in the effort to channel something larger than himself. When silence finally returned, it carried a different quality than any previous moment in the show. It wasn't the silence of anticipation or even appreciation. It was the silence of transformation. 20,000 people collectively processing an experience that had transcended entertainment to become something approaching the sacred. For 30 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Michael himself stood motionless at center stage, head bowed, still clutching James Brown's shoe to his chest. Then, from somewhere in the back of the arena, a single voice began to sing the chorus of "Soul Never Dies," the song Michael had just created before their eyes. Another voice joined, then another. Within moments, thousands were singing the phrase back to Michael, a spontaneous chorus of souls connecting across the artificial boundaries of performer and audience. Michael looked up, visibly startled by this unexpected response. For perhaps the first time in his career, he appeared genuinely surprised by an audience reaction, unprepared for this reversal where the crowd was now performing for him. Tears welled in his eyes, spilled onto his cheeks. He made no effort to hide them or wipe them away. Instead, He simply listened, allowing himself to receive what the audience was giving back to him. When the impromptu chorus finally faded, Michael carefully placed James Brown's shoe on a small pedestal that had been brought to center stage. He knelt before it in a gesture of profound respect that evoked both prayer and the passing of a torch from one generation to another. Rising, he addressed the audience one final time. James Brown gave me permission to be myself. He showed me that boundaries were meant to be broken, that rules were meant to be rewritten, that music wasn't just something you performed, it was something you lived. Michael's voice had regained its strength now, carrying clearly through the hushed arena. Tonight, I want to give you that same permission. Whatever dream lives inside you, whatever voice is asking to be heard, whatever movement is waiting to be expressed, don't wait for someone else's approval. Don't wait until it's perfect. Begin now, exactly where you are. The band, sensing the conclusion of this unplanned interlude, began to softly play the introduction to Man in the Mirror, a perfect thematic transition that would guide the show back to its planned structure while honoring the emotional journey that had just transpired. The remainder of the concert unfolded according to the rehearsed set list, but something fundamental had changed in the relationship between Michael and the audience. The careful distance of celebrity had been replaced by authentic connection. Each song now carried additional layers of meaning, informed by the raw vulnerability they had witnessed. During the final number, as confetti rained down and the elaborate stage lighting created its planned spectacle, Michael returned briefly to the pedestal where James Brown's shoe remained. He touched it gently, a private moment of connection captured on the arena's massive screens. When Michael finally took his bows and exited the stage, the audience remained in place, reluctant to break the spell of what they had experienced together. Many lingered in their seats long after the house lights came up, speaking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. Outside the arena, fans gathered in spontaneous circles, some attempting to recreate the chorus of the unrecorded song they had just heard, others simply sharing their emotional responses to the unexpected journey the evening had provided. In the days that followed, the James Brown tribute became the defining moment of Michael's comeback tour. Fan-recorded videos, low quality by today's standards, circulated widely online, each capturing fragments of what had transpired. Music critics, even those who had approached the comeback tour with skepticism, wrote about the raw authenticity of the moment, many describing it as the most genuine and moving performance of Michael Jackson's career. What no one knew then was that the song Michael had created spontaneously that night, Soul Never Dies, would eventually become the centerpiece of his final album, released posthumously 2 years after his own untimely passing. The studio version, while beautifully produced, never quite captured the raw emotion of its first performance. Those who had been present at the O2 Arena that January night would always insist that the real version existed only in that moment. In that place, a unique convergence of grief, gratitude, and artistic rebirth that could never be truly replicated. James Brown's shoe traveled with Michael for the remainder of the tour. Before each performance, according to one of his backup dancers who later shared the story, Michael would spend a moment alone with it, a private ritual of connection and recommitment to the artistic lineage he had inherited and extended. When the tour concluded, the shoe wasn't returned to Brown's family, as some expected. Instead, at Michael's request, and with the family's blessing, it was donated to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, accompanied by a handwritten note that read simply, "From one dreamer to another." The circle remains unbroken. Today, visitors to the museum often pause before the display containing that worn dance shoe. Most weren't present at the O2 Arena that January night in 2007. They didn't witness 20,000 people united in collective emotional catharsis. They didn't see the moment when Michael Jackson, arguably the most famous and carefully constructed public figure of his generation, allowed his walls to fall away completely. They didn't hear the raw emotion in his voice as he sang a song that didn't exist until that moment. But somehow they understand. Standing before that scuffed shoe in its museum display, they feel an echo of what transpired. The night when Michael Jackson stopped his entire show to honor James Brown's death, and what happened next left millions of fans in tears. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of artistic legacy, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the man behind the legend. Because in these moments of unscripted humanity, we glimpse the truth behind the carefully constructed image, the vulnerability, the gratitude, the authentic connection that made Michael Jackson not just an unparalleled entertainer, but a carrier of cultural flame that continues to illuminate long after his own light has gone out.